Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the new released World Cup calendar. It came out a bit earlier than expected. There were some new names on the calendar, some names returning, some names disappearing from the calendar. We'll go through that in a bit, as well as the final weekend of racing in Oostmalle, and we will briefly talk on the opening weekend on the road as well. With me here to do that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Let's start by talking about the World Cup calendar. It was released at a very surprising moment. I honestly think an intern just sent this out too early or something, because it was meant to come on Friday, and usually they release these press releases at the top of the hour or at the bottom of the hour, but no, it came at a very oddly timed moment at like 18 minutes past, very unlike the UCI to do that, so I think it was a bit of a mistake, but the schedule has been released and as expected there were 14 races on the calendar. I'll go through them first. Waterloo is the opening round on the 15th of August, then a 1 week break before we head into Belgium. Maasmechelen is the second round of the World Cup. Then a 1 week break for the European Championships taking place in Pontchâteau. Then Dendermonde, from Dendermonde to Troyes, then to Dublin, then to Flamanville. After Flamanville we go to the snow of Val di Sole. From Val di Sole back to Namur, which hosts the European Championships the past season. And then we come into a very busy period, the Christmas period. On the 23rd we have Antwerp, which is on a Saturday. Then Gavere on Boxing Day, and then Hulst again on a Saturday. So that makes 3 World Cup races in 1 week there. Just like last season, Zonhoven will finish the Christmas period on the 7th of January. Then a 1 week break for the Nationals. Then we go to Benidorm, and the final returns to Hogerheide. So, if this is all a lot of names for you, here is the recap. Out of the World Cup is Tabor, they are hosting the World Championships, Fayetteville, Besançon, Beekse Bergen and Overijse. There's only one brand new race, that's Troyes, and there are some races returning to the World Cup. Namur, Flamanville, Dendermonde and Hogerheide. So that's the recap of the calendar. Issam, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, some things were logical, bound to happen in a way, because obviously Tabor is not in it because they're organizing the World Championships, and some races, were within doubt of happening. London was one of them. We kind of expected it to be in the calendar. Unfortunately, that didn't go through for whatever reason. The 2 French races that are joining with Troyes and Flamanville are races that in the last couple of weeks have been named. They had an official bid, so thankfully that went through. But yeah, if you talk about the way they balance the World Cup out in a way, and the fact that we have quite some Belgian races in it right now, I think 6, which is quite a lot if you compare it only to last year where we only had 4. It is definitely, you could say that it is worse than last year. We miss out as well on a second American race as well, so I think in many ways you can look at it as maybe even a disappointment in a way, but it's also difficult for the guys making the calendar because there are some circumstances that surround it. You have to make sure that that races are available, and financial struggles as well, so you need to make sure that you find a location that is able to do it, and it seems like they found some locations with Troyes and Flamanville, which is very good, but overall, yeah, we have in a way a bit disappointing, but it's also good to see the likes of a Dublin and Benidorm back on the calendar as well, Val di Sole.
For me, it feels like a big setback on the calendar in terms of where we stood last year. I really had hoped for a bit more, and of course, it makes sense that a race like Tabor isn't in the World Cup because they are hosting the World Championships, but it also tells you something about the amount of options there are for the World Cup races. I have the feeling that Flanders Classics, and this is not the first time, that they are presenting the World Cup like, look at us, we have so much interest, and it creates a bit of a false optimism, especially after the Cyclocross World Championships. That was not only due to Flanders Classics, the UCI played a role in that as well. After the race finished, Peter van den Abele, who has an important role within the UCI, was giving an interview in the Sporza studio, and he was talking as if the sky was the limit for cross. That general feeling that there was there in the Belgian media was that World Championships in Hogerheide was finally going to make a big export product of the sport, and all of a sudden we could go to New York, which was mentioned, and then in other papers all of a sudden there were talks that the World Cup was going to go to Hong Kong or to Johannesburg in the future. And I don't understand that sense of optimism, because yes, it was a good World Championship, but it was not the best race of the season. It was, for me, the third or fourth best race of the season. Gavere and Diegem for sure better. Diegem, my man. Then Gavere 2. For 3, I'm a bit torn. Probably Loenhout. Although for the Worlds there was a lot of, on the line. The stakes were so high, which made it a bit better. But it's probably the atmosphere that sold it. But that optimism just is not correct, and it's reflected in this calendar. Tabor is out, and there's no other Czech cross to step in. Go back to the early 2000s, or maybe a bit earlier, the mid-90s, there were many big crosses in the Czech Republic. That's just not the case anymore. There's also no other country that they're able to add. I mean, if the UK was in, I would say, okay, it's a bit of a trade-off, okay, Czech Republic is out, they organize Worlds, but you're able to bring in London, it's signs of growth again, but it's a bit of a stagnation. And then I come back to what I started with. If we look at the 2020 calendar, we had 16 races on that then, 7 in Belgium, 2 in the Netherlands, and then only 1 race in America. Well, we're back at 1 race in America. Dublin was scheduled for that, so Dublin is on the calendar now. Then we had 1 race in France. Well, we have 2 races in France now, not 1 in Czech Republic. We don't have a race in Switzerland, which was scheduled. We have 1 in Val di Sol now. It's, for me, basically a copy of that calendar. And that brings me to the exact same issues that I had with that calendar. For me, this is hardly a World Cup. How can you call it a World Cup if there's 6 races in Belgium, 2 just over the border in the Netherlands, literally within 6 or 10 kilometers of the border? It's a bit of a Belgian party, and this whole sense of, well, we're going to grow the sport and look at what we're doing just seems misplaced to me if you come up with this calendar. But I don't know how you think about that.
I wouldn't go as far as saying that you cannot call the World Cup. I think that there is still some, there's still some great addition, and this is what we have to deal with. But I agree with, in the sense that the optimism, almost the delusion, if you would call it like that came after Hogerheide and the way they were naming places. There is more behind it than just naming places. It takes a lot to organize a race, and you need to find partners that are willing to do so. And it says something that there is a race in Czech Republic in the likes of Tabor, but with Tabor falling, there is no replacement in a way. We cannot find another race in the Czech Republic. While the Czech Republic in general, they organize quite some races, but they just don't have the resources to do what Tabor does. In many ways, it is a bit of a disappointment. I think the surprising part was, for me, London not being on the calendar. Another thing that I don't really like about it is the way they packed the Christmas period with, last year it was 3 races between 17th of December and then the 8th with Zonhoven of January, and now it's 5. So that's quite a change, in my opinion, bit of an unnecessary one. And yeah, it's the way they do it, they can decide a little bit when the World Cups are gonna be held. But yeah, it's their decision in a way.
Yeah, I think that optimism is more my issue. You can make these claims that you're helping to grow the sport and really internationalizing it, and look at us, it's all valid for me as long as you can back it up. And it's just the same as when they first introduced this plan. There was this article in Sporza where they said, oh, but we have had interest of over 50 organizers to organize a World Cup. But their interest is just people who have requested the bid book, not necessarily an organization that is actually putting forward a candidature to organize one. And again, it just shows, like, I do feel that you are right, like, London is not in, and it's a bit of a calendar that's formed by the situation. Like, to me, it feels that this calendar just came together in this way due to the circumstances. Like, I don't think they expected that Fayetteville would pull. Fayetteville would normally have been the weekend after Waterloo, and that there's a 1 week gap in the calendar there indicates to me that they were surprised by that and then needed to find an alternative race to come in, and that they, well, maybe turned to a race like Namur to fill that gap. And I don't think that they expected London to again not come through. And I do start to question at some point when, or more if, London still will happen. I know there's talks like, yeah, we want to make it happen at some point, but it's the second year in a row that it's heavily rumored, and the talks have been the entire season, London, 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 Pidcock momentum, and it still doesn't come through. So I feel like due to that, they've been forced to form this calendar, but then again, it tells you that the options they have are relatively limited. Maybe I'm expecting too much too soon. That's fair if that's your conclusion, that I'm expecting that, because you might be right on that. But realistically, I would have liked to see another race in it. But maybe next year they will surprise me. London will be in, Munich will be in, Tower will be back in. Who knows? But for now, I'm still a bit disappointed by this. And the first question I have is, if we go through the calendar in chronological order, we're starting with Waterloo, just one US race. Will people bother to go there?
Yeah, that's gonna be a question. Normally, because with Waterloo, the one thing that you have is obviously track heavily involved in it, which is probably going to mean that the Baloise track lines are heading to Waterloo for sure, and then you have to hope that the other teams will follow as well. And it would be a shame if it's not going to, if they're not going to be there with the riders that should be attending a World Cup, and that normally go for a complete World Cup in a way. So I hope that it will be the case, but it's going to be tricky, and especially with how packed that Christmas period is going to be. That is going to be a very important period, and imagine if you have some sort of issue or you're not having the best of days in that period. It normally it's already costly, but for a World Cup, it's definitely going to be it's going to hurt your ambitions in terms of classification. And for me, the ideal scenario, obviously, I think if you want to keep going with the American races at first, is to have at least two, and 3 wouldn't be even that bad. But I think 2 is the minimum, and only with 1 right now, it feels a bit odd, it feels strange, and it wouldn't surprise me if some of the riders are going to decide to not make the trip to the United States.
It depends a bit on the point system. They might still alter it from what I've heard, but with the current point system, I think you can get away with it. 40 points, it's not that much. It's 4 wins, and you've made that up. It might be difficult if you're like Puk Pieterse up against Sven van Empel, but overall I would say it's doable, and we will definitely see some riders opting to skip that. Although then again, the calendar at the moment is still a provisional one. The full calendar isn't complete at the moment. The week before Waterloo, there is not even a race on Belgian soil, which is very weird seeing how packed the calendar is, but we'll come to that in a second. I think some people will skip Waterloo. Fayetteville isn't on there. They are organizing a C2 cross later in the season, which is silly to me, because they said they are not organizing a World Cup because they were disappointed with the starting field last season. Probably not worth the sum you need to invest for that start field for them. Now they're organizing a race after American National Championships, when all the Americans have already been flown over to the US. So who will turn up in what really is the middle of nowhere in Arkansas for a race there? I think they will be even more disappointed this year, but that's up for them, not for me to determine when they organize a race. But if we look then to the start of the Belgian block, Maasmechelen, also not really a fan of that race for the reason that Flanders Classics has been critical on more Belgian races being founded, more Belgian cyclocross races, and then they found one themselves and added to the calendar. Also not really a fan of the course there with that amount of rocks, but I think if they could work on that, it should be an okay race. They did get 10,000 spectators in the early season last year. And then we go to Dendermonde, and we've had some questions, why is Dendermonde back? I will try to answer them. And I think the reason is fairly simple. Issam, if you disagree with me, tell it to me. But Dendermonde organized 2 races during the COVID period. They have a multi-year deal with the terrain they are organizing on. I do think they also have a multi-year deal with the World Cup based on an interview Mette Penningen gave, who is the organizer of that race, in 2020 edition. So basically, Dendermonde invested a lot in organizing 2 COVID editions without any profit in terms of spectator revenue. And last season they pulled on their race because they were afraid that COVID would strike again. They now want it back in, and I don't really like the course in Dendermonde. But on the other hand, I do think it's only fair that they are allowed back in, because they did help the World Cup out a lot in those 2 COVID seasons by putting in a big investment to organize a race.
Yeah, I think that it's indeed in that direction. If you look at from that perspective, they definitely have the right to be in the World Cup, but the World Cup shouldn't be a place feeling pity and having empathy for an organization, because they did something in a period which, in that time it was definitely very difficult. But it was their choice in the end to hold the event at that moment. And I think then in that case, you just need to, if you hold the event, it needs to be sensible, and you need to make sure that you can continue the event. And it's not okay, I hold the event right now, but I need a chance to get back in. But like you said, contractually, they probably had something going, and it might be something that will continue for a couple more years, but that might be a very good reason why Dendermonde is in. In a way, it's also maybe the period, maybe in November, if it's going to be a dry race. Well, I don't know how it will be going, but let's see how it will play out, and maybe when the race happens, we won't be so critical as we are right now. But I think for the World Cup, if they want to make a step, eventually these kind of races needs to be removed first, and then from there on you can look into having 2 very solid, maybe 3 as maximum solid Belgium races, and then build around it internationally. And that would be obviously the ideal World Cup, and I think that is also the World Cup that Flanders Classics is eyeing. But for now, we have to deal with this.
I do think they got an agreement. Like, they probably made a break even on the COVID editions, because else I don't see how they would organize it. I mean, the second edition was very unfortunate because they only announced that there were no spectators allowed 2 days before the event. So I do think you need to keep that in mind as World Cup, because you need to be careful with the organizations you have. If I come back at the American situation, like before we had Jingle Cross in Iowa, which was a fantastic event. I really liked that event, 3-day event, nice course. But last year they just got bullied out of the calendar by poor communication. It's been a reoccurring thing. There's poor communication with planning the calendar, and that was completely the case there. Fayetteville was not at the American meeting of race organizers. They wrote about this on the website of Jingle Cross, and the Jingle Cross thought, well, we can't go in the World Cup this year, we'll just go non-World Cup, final of the USCX series, week after Waterloo, going to be good. World Cup calendar gets announced, and bam, Fayetteville is on their date. There's no riders for their race. They can't reschedule, and they fall. You need to be careful with your organizers. I wish they would do that with more organizers instead of just the Belgian ones. So they probably gave Dendermonde their word, or they maybe even had a deal signed for multi-years. Like, well, you organize now, you'll be allowed to organize with spectators some point. And I do think that's fair, and that is a sustainable way forward. Of course, the World Cup should not be a charity event like, oh yeah, okay, I remember in 2009 you did this for the World Cup, so you will now get a favor back. But something as fresh as this, you need to respect the effort. But I do agree on your second point, like, if the World Cup wants to grow internationally, races in Belgium will need to go. And then the Monde would be my number one. Like, you can get across like this in any other country, so do it in another country than Belgium. In Belgium, you have some fantastic courses. I mean, it's a shame Overijs isn't in. I don't exactly know the reason for that, but it's a nice cross Overijs, or crosses that are in. Zonhoven, fantastic. Gavre, also very nice. Namur, also a nice cross. So you need to work on that on the long term, but for now, I get why Dendermonde is in. For Troyes, that's the race after Dendermonde, I'm pretty excited that this one is in. It's a new French race, the only real new venue we are visiting in the World Cup. But I'm definitely looking forward to that one because, man, that has one nasty off-camber. That's going to be good, especially if it rains. Whoa, that's going to be tasty.
Hopefully they keep it in, but yeah, if that off-camber stays, it's going to be a good one, especially if it drizzles a little bit, rains a little bit. That would be nice. Then it's going to be definitely challenging, but it's nice to see a new organizer in. They have been organizing for some time, and we have seen some races of it, and it's an okay course. It's a bit like your typical French course in a way, but it also has some special elements, and it's going to be an interesting addition, I think, to the World Cup. I don't know what their plans are in the future, but I think it will be a fun race, and the organizers were on the socials were very happy with the announcement that they were in, and it's great to see, as I said, new organizers in it. I think that France definitely deserves 2 races, and hopefully, they will keep being an addition in the World Cup, and hopefully we'll enjoy the racing there as well.
After Troyes, we go to Dublin, which is nice to see that they are back. It was a lovely event this year. I've heard some things that they could improve the spectator experience on site, so let's hope they do that. Then Flamanville, which returns after a year off. We believe this is due to the way that the French subsidies work. They can request them and then they get them once every 2 years, which we believe is why Flamanville and Besançon are likely to alternate in a similar way like Nomet and Pontchâteau did in the past. Then we go to Val d'Isole, also good to see that event returning. And then we come to the Christmas period, and this is another period where I will once again question how busy the calendar is. Last year we thought surely it can't become any busier, but somehow they've managed to do it, because the last week of December, clear your schedules, because starting from the 22nd of December until the 30th of December, it's going to be mayhem. 3 World Cups, but it all starts with the probably exact cross of Mol on the 22nd, then World Cup Antwerp 23rd, Boxing Day cross Gavre on the 26th, then probably 2 super prestiges, Zolder on 27, Diegem on 28, Exact Cross Loenhout on 29, and then Hulst on 30. You think it's over? No, it continues in January with the X2O Trophy in Baal on the 1st, X2O Trophy in Kokzijde on the 4th, then on the 6th we get the Hexia Cross in Gullegem, not sure if it will be in the super prestige again, and then we end with Zonhoven on the 7th. So in 15 days, 11 crosses or something, absolutely insane. And with 4 World Cups, it's definitely the World Cup that is playing into it as well. And the weekend before the Christmas period, there is a double weekend of Herentals and Namur, with Namur returning to the World Cup.
I think it's a bit too much. Quite a lot of races that have been added in that Christmas period in terms of World Cup racing. We have already questioned how busy it is, and it seems like Flanders Classics, and I can understand it in a way, because the numbers in terms of spectators were higher in Belgium during the Christmas period. You have a chance, obviously, that Van der Poel and Van Aert will be starting, which also attracts a little bit more attention. In that sense, I can understand it in a way, but it's, apart from that, it's too much. It really is too much. If you have 5 races in such a packed period, 4 if you start counting from Mol, the 22nd, and then going to Antwerp 23rd. But if you already start from Namur and then go to Zonhoven with 5 races very close, in a very close window, I think it's a bit too much. It's they overdone it there a little bit, and I hope really that the riders will complain about it during the season, because that might maybe wake up the organizers in a way, and then they will have a little sympathy for the riders that have to go through it.
I mean, I wonder if they will complain, because it is too much to do all of them, but on the other hand, it might be a bit difficult to grasp for a more international audience than we are obviously being fed heavily by the Belgian-Dutch narrative, and internationally there seems to be less with the problem of riders not doing the X2O or Super Prestige races, and it's more about the World Cup, what the World Cup wants to achieve in terms of most international classification, most important, is maybe already achieved internationally, at least from what I'm getting from Instagram followers, listeners, etc. I'm getting the feeling that internationally the World Cup is already in the position they want to be. So maybe my criticism on it might sound a bit weird, but here in the Netherlands and Belgium, the X2O trophy and Super Prestige are as important as the World Cup. If you are going to say, well, riders should just choose, do Super Prestige or X2O, they will look at you here like, what? What are you saying? How can you say such a thing? They should maybe skip the World Cup. It might seem very weird to the international audience, but that's the way it's being retrieved here. And here people are happy that there's 6 World Cups in Belgium and 2 in the Netherlands. Probably because they can go to many of them, but you need to make choices with such a packed schedule in the Christmas period. And whether that's choosing Super Prestige World Cup combination or another combination, that's up to the riders. But if you want a sustainable future with classifications existing together, or there being another important classification in Belgium, things will need to change around that. And this is just not healthy for the riders. It's really to the extremes. I mean, Mario de Klerk has a famous quote: the Christmas period is the Tour de France of cyclocross. Well, now it's really a Tour de France, because it's literally 5 days of racing right after each other, and that will just drain your battery mentally and physically. And obviously, as you say, it makes sense for the World Cup. They would just want in on the money. There's plenty of money going around there, as we saw this season with the spectator numbers. But again, I come to question one of the key principles, according to them, which helped redefine cyclocross, is that the World Cup is on every Sunday at the same starting hour. Why are Antwerp and Hulst then on a Saturday? That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, this season we already had lots of viewers missing races because they didn't know Val di Sol was on the Saturday, or they didn't know about the alternating starting hours. And now you're moving 2 races to the Saturday, and I can somewhat understand the reasoning, but on the other hand, I also can't. For Antwerp, the reason is they don't want to have a race on the day of Christmas Eve, and for Hulst, they don't want to have a race on the day of New Year's Eve. But again, I feel like on New Year's Eve, there's also been plenty of things like people want to go somewhere on the day before because they've taken the day off anyway. Or now it's even Sunday, so everybody has the day off. Not too sure on that one, but nevertheless, it's going to be a busy period, and let's hope this year I don't have a cold with the Christmas period, because that would be very unfortunate. After the busy Christmas period, there's just 2 races left in the World Cup, Benidorm and Hogerheide. I think we both agree that it's good to see Benidorm and Hogerheide back in.
Yeah, there were some rumors about Hogerheide maybe not being in on the calendar, but they were quickly denied, and luckily for Hogerheide, and I think also for the cyclocross fans, it's great to have Hogerheide back, and I'm definitely very happy for Benidorm to be back on the calendar as well, because I think they showed that they had a very good organization, and the race was great. The atmosphere was great, and it's good to see one of the international races stick around and organize for another year. And I think the way they were speaking, the organizers, it seems that they have they want to continue for a couple more years, and that's always great to see that the organizers have this plan of staying for a while and sticking around with the World Cup, and definitely very positive to see Benidorm back again.
Then I will end our discussion on the World Cup calendar with some other news on some of the races which are out. Basically, Beeksbergen out because they couldn't make it financially doable or at least profitable to organize a cross there. They did sign a deal for 2 European championships in the future, which indicates to me that we are either going back to Oostmalle, as they are the same organizers, or the wording of that was off, and it meant that they had already organized 2 world champion or European championships in the past, but that's something to remember. And then I still wanted to say about Maasmechelen that I feel kind of the same goes for Dendermonde. It's a race that's here because they owe something to Maasmechelen. I'm not necessarily a fan of the extra race in Belgium, as said, but they did put up a decently organized event within 1 month last year, and I think they definitely get something in return for that by being back in this year. I don't think they could tell Maasmechelen, yeah, last year you staved us out when we had big gaps in the calendar, you put in a lot of effort, and yeah, this year you're booted. I don't think they work like that, at least not with Belgian races, because Gieten obviously did get booted like that from the Super Prestige last season. Then on to the final cross race of the season, the Sluitingsprijs Oostmalle. It's officially over, Issam. We covered it all from the first race in Kruijbeke to the final one in Oostmalle. Today, Laurens Sweeck took the win, and kind of means the season ends where it started, with us talking about how strong Laurens Sweeck has been this season. Van Haar ended second, ahead of Niels van der Putten, but it was a bit of a weird race. I mean, it's always like so late after the Worlds, and it's even more than what we saw the final weeks. I mean, Van Toerenhout, he didn't even seem to care. He finished 26th, 4 minutes down. Iserbyt already went on vacation to Copenhagen, came back, ends 10th. Nobody really cares anymore. It's a bit of a, the final day of school. Like, you just come, have a bit of fun, and whatever you do, it doesn't really matter anymore. But nevertheless, good to see some cross racing on our screen today, and again, Sweeck taking the win. Is he your man of the season if we look at the riders who did the entire season, or would you still lean to Iserbyt for his very flashy start to the season? Or say Van Toerenhout, because of course 2 championships.
Yeah, I was actually, if I had to make the choice, it would have been between Van Toerenhout and Sweeck. I think Van Toerenhout is more of a natural way how it went, especially if you compare it as well to last year as well. It was something that was coming. While with Sweeck, I wouldn't say that it was a complete surprise, but it was definitely not. If you told me at the beginning of the season that Sweeck would have done this season, winning the World Cup, I would have said, nah, that's probably not gonna happen in a normal season. But he did it in a normal season, and he, in my opinion, made the biggest. He changed himself in this season to a rider that is capable of winning races, even with Van Toerenhout and Iserbyt. That was something that Sweeck didn't really have or did have on a very good day, but didn't have over the course of a complete season. I think that definitely changed. So in terms of progression, he made the best progression if you compare it to last year. So I would probably say that Sveik for me is the man of the season.
I would lean to Van Toerenhout simply because he got the biggest wins of the season, European Championships and Belgian Championships, and super consistent. Wouldn't have been all too much of a gap in the World Cup if he hadn't been sick for the final or the penultimate round in Benidorm and then also skipping the final round in Besançon due to that. So would have definitely been interesting to see how that would have turned out. I do think Sveik would have won, but for me, Van Toerenhout with his consistency and then the big wins slightly give him the edge. For me, I thought for the rest today, it's always an interesting opportunity to see some riders. Like it was nice to see Van der Putte on the podium today ahead of Van der Bos, but also Wout Huijps, a rider we haven't really seen a lot this season, ending 5th. Kamp was in 6th ahead of Adams in 7th. Meuse was 8th. He is leaving to the Alpecin de Koning road development team. Not sure for which cross team he will ride. Van Kessel was 9th and Iserbyt ended in 10th. Yeah, pretty decent. Most names we've seen all season. If we look at the women's race, that one was significantly less packed. Even most of the regulars not turning up anymore. Alvarado not there, Brandt not there, but Worst was there, and she really seems to be enjoying these post-world races, just like last season. She took the win. Bakker was 2nd despite some chain issues, and Betsema ended 3rd. So, I mean, quite some names not there, but Worst, I think this will be a bit of a confidence boost for her once again, just like we said the previous weeks going into the summer, and let's hope she can fix her knee issues, because I do think that there is still potential in her, but it needs to come out at some point soon because she's turning 28 this season. The time is kind of ticking, especially with a lot of young talent coming through.
Yeah, the time is always ticking, and I think for Vorst it's definitely the age is going to play a role, especially as an athlete, and the issues that she had were definitely not nice and compromised her. But it seems that at the end of the season it's going quite well. So I'm interested to see how that will play out in terms of what she has to do with the need to get rid of the injury and get rid of the pain that she has or had. And yeah, like you said, I think the next coming years are the years that you are going to be in your prime. Now is the time to capitalize on it, and I think already she had quite some good years, but obviously you still want to achieve the greatest things that are possible. The rainbow stripes are definitely one of them, and see if you can be again very good in a constant classification in the World Cup. Maybe try to go for 2. It's very difficult in a way as well, because you have those youngsters that are not going to be so young in a couple of years, that are already being so dominant in a way, and you have to find your way in between that. And that's going to be interesting if she's going to be able to find something to fight these youngsters. That's going to be very interesting. But I think for her, in terms of the morale, it's definitely on a very good level with the win, and hopefully she can fix the issue over the off season.
Yeah, will definitely be interesting to see how that goes. Same goes for Bakker and Betsema, both riders with tough seasons as well. If we look at the rest of the top 10, Verdonschot had a good period after Worlds. He finishes 4th ahead of Van Alphen, Brouwers, Kay, Baroni, Bentveld and Kapteins. Also an honorable mention for Ellen van Looy, who rode the final cross race of her career. She ended 13th. Then we were planning on talking about the opening weekend on the road, but in all honesty, the cross riders didn't really do all too much, and I would have maybe expected a bit more from especially a rider like Vermeers, but then on the other hand, all we can see is that Tom Pidcock is in decent form. He was 5th in Omloop had a very strong sprint at the end, like started sprinting in like 2/3 of the peloton and managed to end 5th, just behind Christoph. That was decent. He said he had some issues with the cold, and to be honest, it was fairly cold. I did a ride this weekend outside, and it was pretty cold, but yeah, I think overall not too much we can really say about it, except Pidcock looks decent, Merlier in UAE is looking fast, and on the women's side, Backstedt rode 2 races. She had a crash or mechanical yesterday in Omloop when she was in the front group. Didn't feature after that, and today she didn't feature. Pieterse also didn't really feature today. Those were my takeaways. I didn't know if you have any or maybe something I missed.
No, I think fairly on point with what you have. Merlier, definitely that victory that he had in stage 6 UAE Tour was something else. If you didn't watch it, you should definitely check it out because it was quite a sprint. It's looking good. Other than that, I think that Pidcock, these 2 races that have passed with Omloop and Kuurne are races that, in a way you have to get your shot, and it's still a bit early in the season. So, yeah, I think, like you said, that sprint in Omloop was okay, and then it's it's a matter of trying to get through the planning of the road season, and he still has some big goals going for him. So that is he will get his shots, and it will be better very soon, and then he will be able to ride for podium places and for victories. But the opening season of a classics is always the spring classics is always a bit. It's searching a little bit. Some teams are already on it, like Jumbo, but other teams still have to find the right rhythm and are still not really in it. But that will come, and in the next coming weeks we will know a lot more.
For sure, we will be back next week talking about the Strade Bianche, and then we are going to be taking some time off until the racing calls upon us to make a podcast again. Issam, thank you. We made it from Kruijbeke all the way to Oostmalle. Thank you so much for all your support this season.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the listeners for sticking by through the entire season. And still some episodes to go, I guess.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep the going. Maybe some more interviews, but we'll also be taking a bit of rest because it's been a long season with a lot of work. So hopefully you guys will stick around for Strade Bianche and what comes after that. Thanks for listening. Have a good day and goodbye.